Billionaire catches Nanny helping his autistic son speak for the first time. What happens next will make you shed a tear. Most mornings, the Archer penthouse read like a ledger. Everything accounted for, nothing alive. The marble floors gleamed cold beneath the programmed lights that flickered on and off with mechanical precision. The air was still, untouched by breath or laughter. Outside Liam's room, a tray sat untouched, the breakfast cold and forgotten. Julian Archer moved through the space like a ghost, his footsteps measured, his mind ticking through the day's agenda. Control was his refuge, the only way to keep the chaos of loss at bay. Julian's life had narrowed to meetings, metrics, and routines. The silence of his 8-year-old son, Liam, was the house's defining feature. Liam was nonverbal autistic, a boy whose world was locked behind eyes that rarely met his own. Therapists and specialists had filled Julian's days with data, but no conversation. He had poured fortunes into interventions, but the most valuable thing, presence, had never been part of the spreadsheet. That morning, Julian's day was rerouted by a sudden cancellation. An international partner had missed their flight, and the board meeting was called off. With 2 unexpected hours free, Julian decided to return home. Not out of longing or worry, but habit. There was always something to review, something to fix. The elevator ride was quick, the hum of machinery familiar and dull. As the doors slid open to the top floor, Julian stepped out with his usual mental checklist running: security, schedules, staff reports. He wasn't prepared for music. It was faint at first, almost elusive, not the sterile sound of the penthouse's built-in system. The melody had texture, imperfect, alive. Julian paused, uncertainty flickering in his chest. The sound pulled him forward, down the long corridor where sunlight cut through the blinds in soft stripes across the marble floor. Each step was slow, almost involuntary, as the music grew clearer, a delicate waltz, steady and unpolished. Then came something even more unthinkable, the sound of movement. Not the robotic swish of a vacuum or the clatter of cleaning tools, but something fluid, dance-like. He saw her then, Maya Rivera, the nanny he barely noticed, barefoot on the marble, moving with a soft, untrained grace. In one hand, she held a small ribbon, delicate and fluttering. In the other, Liam's. The boy's pale eyes, once distant and vacant, were fixed on her. He tracked her every motion, his fingers curling loosely around the ribbon. Then, impossibly, Liam hummed, a breathy, tentative melody that seemed to belong to the air itself. Julian's breath caught in his throat. His vision blurred, but he did not look away. Liam hadn't made eye contact in years, not even during the most intense therapies. And now, here he was, not just present, but participating in a private dance. Maya noticed Julian's presence, but remained composed. She offered a single nod, calm, unflinching, as if she had expected this moment. She didn't release Liam's hand immediately, but stepped back slowly, easing him out of the dance as gently as she had let it. Julian's mind raced. Was this a violation of protocol? A boundary crossed? Who had given her permission to touch his son? Yet none of those questions carried the weight of what he had just witnessed. Liam's tracking gaze, the hum, the curling fingers, these were signs no report or MRI had ever shown. He moved slowly toward Liam's wheelchair, half expecting the boy to retreat into silence. But Liam didn't flinch. His gaze shifted to the floor, natural and unguarded, not vacant or dissociated. The faint melody lingered in the air, a fragile thread connecting them. Julian stood frozen, caught between disbelief and a flicker of hope. Maya's quiet courage had cracked the silence that had ruled their lives. Later, alone in his office, Julian watched the security footage again and again. The image burned into him. Maya spinning, Liam watching, the ribbon fluttering between them. He did not feel anger or joy. What rose in his chest was unfamiliar, a disturbance in the stillness, a flicker of something he dared not name. If you've ever felt the weight of silence or the ache of missed moments, don't let this story pass quietly. Subscribe now to follow Liam's journey, Because every child deserves to be seen and heard. And please, take a moment to comment below. What time is it where you are, and where are you watching from? Your voice matters, just like Liam's. Julian sat behind his sleek walnut desk, the glow of the security monitor casting sharp shadows across his face. The penthouse had emptied hours ago, the staff gone, the silence settling back like a shroud. He summoned Maya with a terse message, a summons, not a request. When she arrived, her calm presence filled the room, unshaken by the weight of his scrutiny. "Explain what you were doing," Julian said, voice clipped, eyes steeled. No wasted words. Maya folded her hands in front of her apron, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I danced," she said simply. "With my son," Julian pressed, jaw tightening. "Yes." The silence that followed was sharp, a chasm between protocol and possibility. Julian's mind raced through every rule, every boundary she had crossed. "Why?" he demanded, voice low but edged with something rawer than anger. "I danced because he followed the rhythm," Maya replied, steady and clear. "He wasn't told to. He chose to." Julian rose, pacing the room. "You're not a therapist. You have no training. You don't touch him. No one else does," Maya said quietly. "Not with trust. Not with joy. I didn't force him. I followed him." Her calm unnerved him more than defiance would have. You could have undone months of therapy. Years. "There's structure," she said, "and then there's presence." "I gave him presence." Julian's fist clenched. "Do you know what I pay for his care? What the specialists say?" "Yes," she said slowly. "And yet they don't see what I saw today." He chose to follow. With his eyes, with his spirit. The room felt smaller, the distance between them shrinking. Julian's defenses cracked, not in agreement, but in confusion. No part of this fit the formulas he knew. Maya's words lingered. He was alive. In the days that followed, Julian became a silent observer. He watched the footage repeatedly, searching for signs he had missed. Later, he hid in the shadows of the penthouse hallways, watching Maya and Liam in quiet sessions. The boy's eyes tracked the smallest movements. A finger twitching after a spoon tapped gently against his hand, a blink time to a soft melody. One afternoon, Julian found a folded napkin left on the table. Unfolding it, he saw two stick figures mid-spin, arms outstretched, captured in a childlike swirl of lines. It was simple, imperfect, but unmistakably alive. A symbol of something internal, something Liam was beginning to reclaim. The hum returned too, faint but unmistakable. Liam matched the melody, a breathy echo that filled the stillness with fragile hope. A week later, a therapist sat behind the glass wall of the penthouse's clinical room, clipboard in hand, eyes trained on Liam with professional detachment. Maya entered quietly, carrying a soft scarf, a ribbon of color and texture that seemed out of place in the sterile space. She knelt beside Liam, offering the scarf with a gentle invitation rather than a command. Liam's eyes flickered, and then he blinked twice, a deliberate, measured yes. The therapist's pen paused, eyebrows raised. Maya smiled softly, encouraging him with a nod. After patient prompting, Liam's lips parted, and a single word emerged. "Maya." Julian, watching from a hallway, felt the world tilt beneath him. The sound was small, fragile, but it shattered years of silence. His breath caught, and he fled to the stairwell, the cool air stinging his eyes as he let the sob escape in private. Back in his office, Julian wrestled with a potent mix of fear and awe. A boundary had been crossed, a line he wasn't sure he was ready to accept. Yet beneath the fear was something else. Hope, tentative and raw. He called Maya in again, his tone softer but firm. "You're staying, but under strict terms. No more surprises." Maya nodded, accepting the conditions, but with a quiet counterproposal. Less protocol, more invitation. She showed him a simple exercise, a ribbon, a scarf, rhythmic tapping, that required presence, not command. Julian participated awkwardly, feeling the unfamiliar weight of vulnerability. That night, Julian sat alone, watching the footage once more. The dance was no longer just a dance. It was memory, it was promise, it was Eleanor's handwriting echoing in his mind. Teach him to speak even when I'm gone. The ribbon fluttered in the air, a fragile bridge between loss and possibility. Julian lay awake long after the penthouse had fallen silent. The usual hum of the city below was muffled by the thick glass walls, but inside, his mind churned with restless thoughts. The weight of the day's revelations pressed on him, heavier than any boardroom decision or financial report. He rose quietly, slipping from the bedroom into the dim study where dust motes floated in the soft glow of a single desk lamp. The room smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Julian's fingers traced the edges of scattered keepsakes, photographs, worn books, a silver locket Eleanor had once worn. His hand hesitated over a drawer, one he rarely opened. The creak of its hinges echoed in the stillness as he pulled it open, revealing a collection of letters and notes, yellowed with age. Among them, a folded envelope caught his eye. He unfolded the delicate paper, the scent of Eleanor's handwriting rising like a ghost. The letter was addressed to him, written before the accident, a message from a time when hope still lived in their home. If you ever forget how to feel, teach him to laugh, teach him to speak, not by tests but by touch and music. Julian read the words aloud, his voice breaking in the quiet room. The letter was both a mirror and a rebuke. He had spent years trying to fix what grief had broken, pouring money and control into every possible intervention. But Eleanor's words cut through the armor he had built, reminding him that healing required presence, not perfection. Tears blurred his vision as the first crack in his carefully constructed facade appeared. For the first time, Julian allowed himself to grieve openly, not as a CEO managing loss, but as a father mourning what he had almost lost forever. Meanwhile, in the far corner of the penthouse, Maya moved quietly through the study, dusting shelves and arranging books. Her fingers brushed against a stack of papers tucked behind a row of leather-bound volumes. Curiosity pulled her closer, and she found an envelope, yellowed and sealed with a faded wax stamp. The words on the front were simple but heavy, "For my other daughter." Maya's breath caught. She hesitated, then carefully broke the seal. Inside was a birth certificate, a note, and a photograph, proof that Victor Archer, Julian's father, was also her father. The truth settled over her like a storm, a mixture of stunned disbelief, grief, and a strange, complex relief. She folded the papers carefully, her mind racing but her expression steady. This was not a moment for confrontation, but for quiet reckoning. Maya tucked the envelope into her apron pocket and continued her work, the weight of her new identity pressing silently against her chest. Days passed before Maya brought the envelope to Julian. The moment was heavy with unspoken tension as she placed the papers on his desk. "You're my half-sister," she said simply. Julian stared, the words echoing in the sterile room. Shame, anger, and disbelief warred within him. Secrets long buried had surfaced, fracturing the fragile trust between them. Staff whispered in hushed tones, the household's rhythm disrupted by the revelation. Liam, sensitive to the emotional undercurrents, began to regress. The humming stopped, small motions slackened, and the fragile progress they had fought for seemed to unravel. Julian withdrew into his fortress of control, shutting the door on the chaos outside. Maya retreated as well, the distance between them growing wider with each passing day. The penthouse fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the faintest sign of life. A single finger twitch from Liam, barely perceptible but unmistakably there. It was a fragile thread of hope in a house weighed down by grief and fractured family ties. Julian sat alone, the letter from Eleanor resting on his desk, the words a quiet reminder that the path forward would demand more than control. It would require love. The penthouse had grown colder in the days after the revelation. The rooms, once filled with tentative warmth, now echoed with mechanical routine. Scheduled music played at precise intervals, therapists observed from behind glass walls, and the staff moved with practiced efficiency. But the heart was missing. Julian tried to replicate the sessions he had seen Maya lead, but they fell flat, hollow gestures devoid of the fragile connection that had sparked hope. Liam sat in his usual spot, eyes distant, fingers still. The humming had ceased, replaced by silence heavier than before. The ribbon Maya had once held lay folded on a side table, a quiet relic of what had been. Julian watched from the shadows, frustration and helplessness gnawing at him. The control he clung to felt more like a cage, and the progress they had made seemed to slip further away with each passing day. One evening, Julian sought Maya out. The penthouse was quiet, the usual bustle stilled. He found her in the study, arranging books with a calm steadiness that contrasted sharply with his own turmoil. He hesitated, words caught in his throat. "Maya," he began, voice halting, stripped of ego. I'm sorry. For the secrets, for not knowing. For prioritizing control over everything else." Maya looked up, her eyes steady. "I didn't want to be family," she said softly. "Not because I didn't want you, but because I feared belonging would be conditional. I wasn't looking for a name. I was looking for a place to be consistent." Julian swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling between them. "I've been trying to fix what grief broke," he admitted. "But maybe I need to learn how to witness instead." Maya nodded, a small, hopeful smile touching her lips. "Presence over perfection." Julian took a deep breath. "I want you to stay, not just as staff, but as family. But we need terms, boundaries." Maya considered, then offered a counterproposal. "Less protocol, more invitations." She pulled a ribbon from her apron pocket, the same delicate scarf that had first bridged Liam's silence. "This," she said, "isn't about commands or schedules. It's about presence, rhythm, invitation." She demonstrated a simple exercise, rhythmic tapping, gentle movements with the scarf, a quiet dance of attention and response. Julian joined awkwardly, his movements stiff, unfamiliar. But as the ribbon fluttered between them, something shifted, a crack in the armor of control. Together, they began to dream beyond the penthouse walls. This method, movement first, invitation-based, could help others like Liam. They carved out the long marble hallway as a place to practice, naming it the Voice and Movement Center. Staff training followed, with Maya leading sessions on presence and invitation. They reached out to therapists open to new approaches, building a small but hopeful community. Early sessions with other children brought small victories. A blink here, a smile there, a finger twitch that spoke volumes. One afternoon, during a group activity, Liam hummed again, a soft, breathy melody that filled the room with fragile hope. Julian watched, heart swelling, as the boy who had once been locked in silence found his voice in the rhythm of connection. Months passed in a montage of practice and progress. Julian loosened his grip on control, learning to sit with uncertainty. Maya found belonging not in a name, but in the quiet leadership she offered. The penthouse transformed from a mausoleum of silence to a home of music, movement, and shared life. Plans for the center's opening took shape, a modest ceremony, a public moment to share their journey. Julian's nerves stirred with uncertainty. Would Liam perform? Could the fragile progress hold under the gaze of strangers? The ribbon lay folded on Julian's desk, Eleanor's letter beside it, a reminder that healing was not about fixing, but about inviting presence. The penthouse was transformed. Rows of folding chairs lined the marble hallway, softened by warm lighting that spilled from elegant sconces. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the adjacent rooms, a sound once foreign to these walls. Ribbons, soft, colorful, were laid out on tables, fluttering gently in the subtle breeze from open windows. The polished floor gleamed underfoot, reflecting the quiet anticipation that filled the air. Julian stood near the entrance, his hands clenched at his sides, nerves tightening like a coil. Across from him, Maya moved with steady calm, her presence a quiet anchor amid the swirling tension. The years of struggle, the fragile breakthroughs, all led to this moment, a public unveiling of hope. The small audience gathered, parents clutching hopeful hands, doctors with skeptical eyes, donors whose generosity was measured in cautious optimism. A therapist stepped forward, her voice brisk and professional as she introduced the Voice and Movement Center. She spoke of movement-first approaches, of invitation over instruction, of healing beyond the clinical. Yet beneath the polished words, the room held attention, a collective breath held between doubt and desire. The audience watched, waiting for proof that this fragile experiment could bear fruit. Behind the curtain, Julian and Maya shared a quiet moment. No words were spoken, but the weight of unspoken apologies and shared hopes passed between them. Maya leaned close to Liam, whispering softly, "We'll do it together." Julian steadied the walker beneath Liam's trembling hands, feeling the boy's small grip tighten. This was intimacy, a preparation not just for the ceremony, but for the leap of faith they all were about to take. The room fell silent as Liam began to rise, breath slow and measured, muscles engaging with tentative strength. A small wobble, a faltering step. The audience held their breath, hearts suspended in fragile hope. Liam's hand found Julian's shoulder, steadying himself. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper but clear and deliberate, he said, "Dad." The sound shattered the stillness. Tears welled in Julian's eyes as the room erupted into applause and quiet sobs. The ribbon Maya had held fluttered in the breeze, a silent witness to the moment. Julian felt a release, a surrender to imperfect human healing. The boy who had once been locked in silence had found his voice, not through tests or technology, but through presence, patience, and love. In the days that followed, the penthouse breathed differently. Music played freely, volunteers arrived with open hands, and children filled the hallway with tentative steps and hopeful smiles. Julian no longer reached first for progress reports. Instead, he sat beside Liam, sharing moments without expectation. Maya and Julian's hands found each other often, literal and figurative bonds forged in the quiet work of healing. The center opened with modest success, but its meaning was profound. On a table near the entrance, the ribbon lay folded, not proof of a miracle, but the record of a single choice to move. Thank you for sharing this journey with us. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to stay connected to more stories of hope and healing. We'd love to hear from you. Comment below with your favorite part of Liam's story and what it meant to you. Your reflections keep the conversation alive.